Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion on the Venomverse miniseries as we take a look at Venomverse number 3. Now, last time on Venomverse! So, after the Venom army was attacked in their home base by the Poisons, they all managed to do a strategic retreat, and while, unfortunately, some members of their team were either absorbed and or killed, they all managed to meet back up later and made their way to their new base, and on the way there, our Venom managed to learn exactly what the Poisons are, and essentially, they are the perfect hosts for the symbiote, as when a symbiote joins with a poison, they essentially become one, and the Poisons manage to essentially integrate the symbiote into their systems and make the inherent symbiote even more powerful than it was before. But unfortunately, in order for this process to work, the symbiote already needs to be bonded with a host, and unfortunately, as the poison and the symbiote become one, the host ends up being used as food for to fuel the fusion, so to speak. And as a result, the poison literally consumes the host, ends up subverting the symbiote, and they all just they transform into the bigger poisons that seem to resemble heroes and villains. Which in other words, and as a result of this, the poisons do end up taking on the powers, abilities, and in some cases the personalities of the original hosts, but sadly the original hosts die while the symbiotes end up losing any semblance of a will they had. So it's not a nice process. And unfortunately, it's one that continues on, as when the Venom army managed to situate themselves in the Our Lady of Saints Church, unfortunately Captain America, who the previous issue had been captured, ends up getting consumed by the poisons and joins their army. And sadly, he's not the only one. As Deadpool, after kind of changing his point of view, so to speak, on the poisons and believing that eventually the Venoms will lose, ends up abandoning their army and decides to go join them, which is how the last issue ended. And well, this issue we see the end result of that, as we see Deadpool now newly minted into the poisons. And what I do kind of like is that when Deadpool is fully consumed, he actually talks about it and talks about how the process about how the weapon, i.e. the symbiote, is stripped of its will. The host is used as fuel. They become something greater, something than what they were before, and that it hurts so good and all that crap. But either way, yeah, Deadpool manages to acclimate well to joining up with the poisons. Which, let me see if I can find a good panel shot of Deadpool after he joins them. Let me see. I can do this. There it is. There is Poison Deadpool. It's all right. It's cool. It's essentially just Deadpool, but more armored. But either way, yeah. Now with Deadpool now joining the Poison Army, well, he's able to give the poisons he's able to give the poisons intel on where the Venom Army is situated. And speaking of which, we end up cutting back to them as they're at the Our Lady of Saints Church and just trying to situate themselves. They're unpacking things, getting themselves comfortable, and well, they're trying to get a strategy in place to finally take the fight to the poisons. With Rocky continuing to work on his bomb that's supposed to take on the poisons, which apparently is supposed to actually create such concussive force that it can atomize anything in seconds. And, well, in the meantime, Venom and Doctor Strange are employing Venom's strategy of bringing their doomsday device, so to speak. Although, of course, the other resident Venoms in the group are not exactly okay with this. As for one thing, even Spinnerets even thinks that this might be a little crazy, and even thinks it might be a little crazy, as she comments about how she wonders that... Hold on one second. Well, actually, okay, sorry, I misremembered. But yeah, pretty much Spinneret talks about how she wonders why they would need a bomb that like the one Rocket's working on if Eddie and Doctor Strange are summoning their own weapon. And in the meantime, we actually do get what I think is actually a nice character moment between Mania and the Host Rider as they're sitting up in the bell tower and just kind of talking about everything and about how you can kind of see their perspective on the war they're in, as basically Mania talks about how she wonders if Deadpool was taken by the poisons or if he just ran off and just left them to die while he went to go get some frozen chimichangas or so forth. And the Host Rider just tells Mania that it doesn't really that while Deadpool may reek of sin, he's not evil. So there is a chance that he might end up that he might have been taken, and Mania, just for a little brief second, just looks like she might be giving up hope a little, as she thinks that eventually the poisons are going to come for them all. But the Host Rider tells her, no, they're not going to get us, not without a fight. And what I kind of like here is that when Mania talks to the Host Rider, she doesn't call him the Host Rider, or Eli, or Venom, or whatever. She actually calls him Robbie. like, which I kind of like. I do like that. It's a small thing, and it's only, and it doesn't, and it don't, and this is like the first time we see this connection at all, as we hadn't seen it in the previous issues, but considering the whole backstory that we saw of the Host Rider in Edge of Venomverse #3, and about how the only role Robbie has in the thing is that he's ultimately just the ride that Eli and the symbiote are using, I kind of like that when Mania talks to the talks to the Host Rider, she calls him Robbie. It's a nice little humanizing factor there that showcases that it showcases that ultimately in the end that Robbie is still in there and she is trying to connect to him, that he is still a part of the whole equation, and she's not seeing him as an expendable resource that his symbiote is utilizing in order to keep going. She instead actually talks to him like she actually is instead talking to the man within the monster and saying, "Look, Robbie," essentially telling Robbie, "We're here. I see you. I acknowledge you, and you're my friend." I like that. It's a small thing, but I like that essentially Mania Mania actually does acknowledge Robbie in there, not the monsters that make the Host Rider up, but the man that they're using. I like that. It's a nice way of showing that that even that underneath that darkness there is someone that he's still there, and I kind of like that, which ultimately makes what happens later in this issue more tragic, but we'll get to that. But in the meantime, going back with Venom and Strange, we do see them as they're in the middle, as we see them in the middle of a new summoning process, as like I said, since Strange has regained his strength so he's bringing in what Eddie called their new weapon, and unfortunately, this one is not very easy to grab, as in the way that Doctor Strange describes it. It's like trying to grab water as it slips through your fingers. Though he later changes that analogy as he says, "Wait, no, not water, blood." And yeah, it's clear that whatever he's summoning, it's kind of a big deal because other Venomized heroes are on standby and are making it clear that if something goes wrong, if something goes wrong, then they might need to fight. But ultimately, Strange does manage to get a grasp on whatever it is that Venom wants him to bring, and well, he manages to summon him. It takes a lot of his strength out of him, but he succeeds, and well, in the midst of his whirlwind of a summoning storm spell, we soon see who exactly that Strange called. Venom wanted a bomb. Well, he got the next best thing. The Poisons want symbiotes. Then they'll get a mouthful with this next one, because the figure that Venom had Strange call was Carnage. Now, this isn't the main universe Carnage, because at the time of the story, Cletus Cassidy did not have the Carnage symbiote. Apparently, it went to Norman Osborn, and he became the Red Goblin, and after that, I don't know what happened to it. And likewise, this version of Carnage even confirms that in his universe, he actually killed his world's Venom, as the instant he arrives, he immediately identifies Venom and says, "You're not my daddy. You look like him, you smell like him, but you're not him." But yeah, but ultimately, regardless of this Carnage's universe of origin, he is very much like the original, and the instant he arrives, he makes it clear that he doesn't like being pulled from nowhere against his will, and that he's ready to start slaying everyone in his path. Now, while Venom tries to calm him down and say, "Look, we need your help, we need you to kill for us," well, Carnage ain't having any of that shit. As the instant he gets his bearings, he immediately turns and attacks the Venoms and just starts trying to stab them, slash at them, do everything they can, and essentially all the Venoms have to start dogpiling on him. Now, of course, our Venom does not want Carnage hurt because he genuinely believes that they need him to fight the Poisons, but Carnage is ultimately disappointed by that because, hey, he's Carnage. He wants a real battle. If they're not doing their all base, he might as well just leave, which he almost tries to do before running into more Venoms in the army, but ultimately all of the various Venoms manage to crowd around Carnage, and if all he thinks this is just going to be a slaughter fest with all the Venoms as his meat puppets, well, immediately Mania and the Host Rider come running down and say they got a problem, and before Carnage can turn his attention to them, a wall ends up blowing up, and we see a gaggle of poisoned heroes and villains burst through, being led by the poisoned Captain America. Which, one thing that I kind of love, and I really do, and I mean this, the instant Carnage sees the poisoned heroes and villains, he just stops trying to fight the Venoms, and it's like, wait, are these the guys you brought me here for? A bunch of messed up superheroes? Why didn't you just say so? And immediately he just turns his attention on the poisons, even slaughtering a poison Iron Fist. I don't know why. I love that. It's just like it's like the instant he realized, oh, you want me here to kill superheroes? Well, I can do that. I don't know why. I love that. But either way, yeah, Carnage actually manages to do some significant damage to the poisons, which actually throws them off their game quite a bit because they were not expecting that to happen. But either way, in the midst of the battle, the Venoms do their best to fend off the poisons, while also realizing they need to make another strategic. They also need to make another strategic retreat. Unfortunately, though, in the midst of the battle, two things end up happening. One, a little poison manages to get onto the Host Rider, and unfortunately, despite the Host Rider gaining his powers from the depths of hell, well, he's still bonded to a symbiote, and unfortunately, the poison manages to completely consume the skeletal race car driver. And well, basically anything that was left of Robbie Reyes, Eli, or the symbiote is immediately consumed as the Host Rider is transformed into a poison Ghost Rider, who at first looks like he might end up turning the tide of battle for the poisons, before Carnage manages to run in and stab him right through the back, which does end up killing him, though before he dies, the poison Ghost Rider manages to get one good licking on Carnage as he turns his head a literal 180 degrees and breathes fire right in his face. But in the meantime, with Doctor Strange, he's cornered by the bunch of little he ends up getting cornered by a bunch of little poisons who, well, they can't actually. They do back him into a corner, but thankfully, despite his weakened state, he actually has casted runes to keep them from getting close to him, so he won't be consumed. Unfortunately, though, his runes aren't so good that the other poisons can't grab him, i.e. the ones that consume superheroes. And while the bigger poisons quickly realize we can't win this fight, they brought in Carnage, we're not going to do that, they decide, well, screw this, we're just going to grab what we came here for. And sure enough, yeah, they're here for Doctor Strange, because turns out he's the source. But as such, they managed to grab him and run away. They managed to grab him and flee the scene, and after the various Venoms manage to regain their bearings and figure out who's there and who's not, which ultimately results in Carnage bragging about how he killed the poison Ghost Rider before Mania rightfully calls him out and says, hey, he had a name, his name was Robbie, unfortunately, though, the Venoms quickly realize that Strange has been taken, and well, again, with the location of their current base now known to the poisons, they once again have to make another retreat as they all leave. Unfortunately, though, as the Venom army is swinging away and trying to figure out their next move, well, they start thinking about what they can do. Because after all, Doctor Strange was not only how they got to this world, but also was their ride home. He was the guy it was his spells that summoned them all here in the first place, and without him, not only are they stuck on this world with the poisons, but they can no longer bring in reinforcements. So they don't know what to do in that regard. But it's here that Venom starts putting pieces together. As he begins thinking it over, and he quickly realizes one thing. A very bad thing. It turns out, this entire war, the reason why the poisons wanted Doctor Strange, simple. Doctor Strange is essentially giving them an all-you-can-eat buffet. And speaking of the Good Doctor, when we go back to the poisons, we do see that Captain America. We do see that Poison Cap is giving a rundown of what happened in battle and explaining how the poisons got their asses royally kicked by Carnage. I'm surprised that he didn't recognize Carnage at all, because I know that version of that Cap was from a universe where he got the symbiote instead of Eddie, but at least with all the other universes, they at least implied that the Venom was a regular supervillain before the symbiote went to these individual people. So you're telling me that there was no version of Carnage in Cap's universe? I don't know why. I'm a little suspect of that. Maybe the circumstances would have been different. Maybe the Carnage symbiote went to, like, I don't know, would have gone to Red Skull if things had gone the way they were supposed to in Cap's universe. But I don't know, and I can't really theorize on that. But either way, Doom recognizes Carnage, and as such, they realize that that's an obstacle they need to take care of in the future. But ultimately, he does ask them if their primary target has been captured, and Cap does confirm, yep, they got what they wanted. In this case, it was Doctor Strange, who is now locked up in an area of the poison space, which What I kind of like is that it's a kind of sort of ruined spaceship. It looks like it just kind of crashed into the middle of New York, and essentially nobody bothered to move it. But in the meantime, yeah, thankfully Steven's wards are still intact. No little poisons are able to get near him, and while they try to get him to dispel the wards using their psychic whatever trick, again, thanks to his spells, Doctor Strange can see right through the illusions and is not fooled by them. Unfortunately, the poisons still have a good chunk of magic users in their fold, so they do start trying to little by little work through his wards, but even Doom warns them that Strange is the Sorcerer Supreme. Yeah, they even admit that, the other magic users admit they had similar wards to Strange, and they all got turned. But, again, Doctor Strange is the literal big daddy of sorcerers. He didn't gain the title from just doing street magic. So he tells them that if they want to break through his runes, it's gonna be a while. As such, when Strange sees that Doom is a part of the poisons, even he's not surprised. But ultimately, Doctor Doom just kind of lay down exactly why they want Strange, and yep, it's exactly the reason why it's exactly what Venom suspected. Put simply, since Doctor Strange has been the one casting the spells to pull in the various Venoms from across the multiverse, well, the poisons kind of want that. After all, they want symbiotes. They want viable hosts that they can absorb into their fold. And well, Strange has been giving them that. As he's been pulling in Venoms for his army to face off against the poisons have essentially just looked at this and thought, oh sweet, it's an all-you-can-eat buffet. And so, just one by one, they've essentially, every time they fought the Venoms, they've just absorbed more and more. And essentially, the reason the poisons want Strange is that once they convert him, they want him to keep doing that. They want him to use his magic powers to start summoning more and more Venoms across the multiverse that they can absorb into their fold. And yeah, what I like is that the instant Steven realizes that what he's been doing has actually been helping the poisons instead of doing any harm, he's just justifiably horrified, and sadly, the issue ends with Doom kind of rubbing in his face that sooner or later he will give in, whether it be by his own volition or by force. So, yeah. So okay, thoughts on the issue. For the most part, it's mostly action again, but I'll give credit where it's due. It's fun action. For starters, the instant that Carnage is brought into the fray, I just thought it was awesome because it's Carnage. It's freaking Carnage, and what I do like is that in a way, Carnage kind of fits into the whole Spider-Verse side of things, so to speak. Yeah, the version of Carnage we're seeing here isn't the one from the main universe, but he is also one of those characters that's kind of like a spin-off of Venom. Kind of in a similar way that Spider-Woman was, or Anya Corazon. Basically, while they may not technically be an alternate version of the superhero that we know, they're still close enough. They have similar power sets, and thus ultimately kind of fall into similar areas. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that Spider-Woman is to Carnage and I'm not saying that Spider-Woman and Carnage are cut from the same cloth. They are two very different characters. But what I mean is that when it comes to the characters that Spider-Verse and Venomverse are based around, i.e. Spider-Man and Venom, ultimately these characters are kind of like distaff counterparts to them. They're not exactly the same as them. They're not even close to them. They have their own unique differences that make them their own characters, but they have enough in common that you can still technically count them as part of the whole multiple universes self trope. And so likewise, bringing in Carnage bringing in Carnage into the fold, I think is genuinely really cool. And I love his entrance. I just love that the instant he shows up, he's just guns blazing. He knows that someone brought him here for a reason, but honestly, he doesn't give a shit what that reason is. Someone took him against his will, he's ready to start slaughtering. And the instant he learns that the people who did that were alternate Venoms from across the multiverse, well, even better. It just means that he can get more fun out of slaughtering them all. And I love that. What I kind of find funny is that as he goes around the church as he's fighting the Venoms, he just loves the fact that everybody there is bonded to alternate versions of his parent symbiote. I kind of find that amusing. It's kind of sickly amusing in a way. And again, I love that the instant Carnage realizes that the Venoms brought him here to fight the Poisons, he's like, oh, why didn't you just tell me that? I can do that. I love that. Like, immediately his aggression is turned to the Poisons, so while he makes it clear to the Venoms that at some point he does want to turn on them, for now, he's content killing the Poisons. So ultimately, he is on their side. It's just that again, it's Carnage, and the only reason he even wants to be on their side is because he just finds it fun to fight the Poisons, so... I like that. I like that. It's fun. And I do kind of like how he revels in slaughtering the Poisons. So that's kind of cool. But we also get some genuine. But on top of that, I do like that we get some more genuine plot development in that. For one thing, again, it is cool that as the Venoms try to adapt to fighting the Poisons, they do try to seeking out new strategies. I do like that we get to see Rocket building on more and more as he tries building up his bomb to try and take out the Poisons, and going off of having Carnage become a part of this event, I like that essentially the Venoms are just trying to get any advantage they can. Like Eddie said in the last issue, bringing in Carnage is a risk. After all, it's Carnage, an individual who is so psychotic, so insane, so bloodthirsty that he is one of the few villains that cause Spider-Man and Venom to put aside any animosity they have for each other just because they want to take this guy down. He is very much. Like as Venom said in the book, he's a big gun. Okay, he doesn't use those words, but put simply, that is what he is. He's the big gun. He's the BFG. He is the great nuclear weapon. But unfortunately, he has just as much capabilities of harming the person holding the gun as he is as the people that he's being shot at. And so the Venoms when the Venoms bring him into their fold, they know this and they pretty much decide and don't know if it's an acceptable risk or not. So I like that bit of tension. And so having him be brought in, it just kind of brings a whole other flavor of insanity to the mix. As Carnage, when Carnage is brought in, he makes it clear that he's only fighting the Poisons because he enjoys killing them, and that in the end of the day, he doesn't really give a shit what cause the Venoms are genuinely fighting for. If it's for freedom, for saving the symbiotes, he doesn't care. He just wants to kill things, and the Poisons are ample targets. So there you go. And again, another little thing I like, and again, it's a small aspect of the comic, like very small, not very small, really just kind of drive-by for the most part, it's like a drive-by. But again, I like that we get like quiet moments of the Venoms as they're contemplating everything. We see them more, which again is a nice little thing I like when you have crossovers like this, when you have multiple versions of a character meeting up. And for this one, it's when the Venoms are just kind of sitting in the church and waiting for Carnage to be summoned. Again, we got the scene with Spinneret and Rocket as Rocket talks about the bomb he's creating and how they're just kind of talking about, and we see him and Spinneret exchanging strategies. But then likewise, we get the small scene with Mania and the Host Rider up in the bell tower, which again, it's just a quiet moment that shows just what this battle is doing to the soldiers, so to speak. Despite Mania knowing that Deadpool has probably been taken by the Poisons, even she's trying to hold on to any form of hope that she can. Like, maybe he's not dead. Maybe he just ran off and abandoned us. But even the Host Rider, but ultimately the Host Rider is the one that has to bring her down to Earth and says, look, he may be psychotic and nuts, but he's not evil. Not evil. He wouldn't just abandon us for no reason. So even so that realization you can see a little bit of Mania's a thick hide kind of chip a little as she just says, no, he's probably been taken and we're probably going to join him soon. But which also leads to a nice moment as the Host Rider actually tells Mania, no, they're not going to take us, not without a fight. And then likewise, as Mania challenges him and talks about she doesn't exactly trust Venom's strategy for bringing in Carnage, she refers to the Host Rider as Robbie, which again, I like that little thing in there because again, considering the Host Rider's history and how Robbie ultimately has almost no control over the greater whole of what the Host Rider does, I like that she at least acknowledges him, that ultimately he is a part of this. It's kind of goes off of like with how the Venomites Cap referred to the Venoms in the framing story for Venomverse War Stories, like how Doctor Strange called them all bodies to throw out their enemies, while Cap said, "Don't talk to them like that. They're people. They're soldiers, and they're soldiers, and so on." And so to kind of have Mania, who is also technically bonded with an alternate Venom symbiote, actually talk to the Host Rider and pretty much just talk and actually talk to the man beneath the monster, I like that. It's essentially her trying to connect with Robbie underneath all that and showcase that in the end of the day, Robbie is a part of the Host Rider. He's not just fuel for the tank, so to speak. He's not just the ride that the monsters are using to get around. He is the she wants to genuinely connect to the man. And considering what we saw of Robbie in Edge of Venomverse #3 and about how ultimately the only semblance of control he has over the Host Rider is how he's getting it to stop is to ensure it doesn't kill any innocents. Well, I like that. It's a little thing. Again, I admit it's not even like a big thing in the comic. As once the Host Rider is converted to the poisons, the only semblance that they made a connection was when Mania called Carnage out for just blowing off his death, and she rightfully says his name was Robbie. Which I still kind of like that, but I like that she at least makes the attempt to communicate with him, because again, they're all technically bonded with these monsters, and in some cases, the monsters are the ones in the driver's seat, and it's kind of 50-50 with their hosts on who's in control. So for them to actually look at the Host Rider and say hi Robbie, I like that. It's just acknowledging that he's in there and that he's a part of the team, and that they don't see him as just the guy that they need to deal with so they can have the Host Rider. They're actually talking. It's basically saying the guy who we want. It's basically just saying you're our teammate. You're our cohort. You are part of our army, and we appreciate having you here. Again, it's a small thing. It's a small little detail. But I like that. Considering the whole thing with the Host Rider, I at least like that, which ultimately makes it sadder when the Host Rider gets consumed by the poisons and then gets subsequently killed by Carnage, because essentially it took a guy who had no say in this matter, who wanted nothing to do with what was going on with the symbiote, and was ultimately even the parasites admitted that they only really used him as a ride. Suddenly now be completely and utterly consumed by these alien monsters who only want him for the symbiote that he's bonded with. It's actually very tragic that essentially Robbie lost his life, lost everything he had to these monsters, and now he doesn't even have that anymore. To have himself be completely subsumed by this other creature, I think that's even more tragic. It makes it sad. And ultimately with how he got and with how he was eventually converted and then eventually killed by Carnage, it's actually it's tragic. Now, they don't really have time to mourn for this because, well, it's ultimately another character death on the fire. And aside from Mania chewing Carnage out for treating him as nothing more than a meat slab that he can slice and dice, again, it doesn't really come back in the story. It's just another casualty in the war, which is another little thing. It kind of reminds me of what we saw in Spider-Verse with how they brought in all these different Spideys from across the multiverse, and ultimately for most of them, they were just cannon fodder despite being pre-established Spideys. It's a similar case with Venomverse, sadly. It's again it doesn't happen as often, as a lot of these characters are mostly alternate versions of heroes that we know. So there isn't, and as such, while there is tragedy in there, we can still find solace in that it's non-canon versions. But for some, these are meant to be alternate versions of characters that we were introduced to before, like with Agent Venom, who was an alternate version of a Venom host that we had seen in the past with Flash Thompson. And then likewise with the Host Rider, he was a pre-established character prior to Venomverse. And again, he was scratch that. He was pre-established in Edge of Venomverse #3, but Edge of Venomverse #3 at least gave us his backstory and told us what was going on with him and how he fit into and how his whole deal with the symbiote worked. So to see him get offed to see him get offed, consumed by the poisons, and combine that with his history and his honestly toxic relationship with both Eli and the symbiote, it's honestly tragic. And the way that not only tragic, and despite it kind of sucks that the only acknowledgement of his death is when Mania just calls Carnage out, and that goes for Agent Venom too. Now, before you say, well, they're in the middle of a war, they don't have time to mourn, well, you have a point there. They are in the middle of a war. They can't rest for a minute, but at the same time, you think they would have like a moment when they're having a breath to just kind of remember the fallen, which I guess we kind of got with Mania and the Host Rider when they were sitting in the bell tower, so I'll give you that one. It's just, again, it does kind of suck that it doesn't really have a lot more lasting repercussions throughout the story. So, on top of that, there's also the final twist at the end that the Poison's ultimate goal is to just bring in more Venoms. That they aren't doing this that they want Doctor Strange to be a part of their team because they just want him to keep doing what he's already been doing. But for them, they want him to keep bringing them more Venom hosts so they can consume. So I like that. It kind of is twisted, and I like how I love the kind of tone shift that we got from the story when Doctor Strange quickly realized that what he's been doing has actually been hurting the Venoms rather than helping them, because he's been doing, which even when I first read the story, I was able to put two and two together. It's like, so you're bringing in Venoms for these things to consume? Isn't that just like giving them more soldiers to work with? And so when the Venoms quickly realized, oh shit, we are actually giving the bad guys exactly what they want. It's an immediate tone shift, and it immediately makes you realize they can't, even if they had Strange on standby, they can't bring in any more Venoms, because ultimately that's exactly what the Poisons want. They want more bodies to be thrown at them. They want more food they want more fuel for the tank, so to speak. And ultimately, that's the reason they want Doctor Strange. He's the source, as they called him. With him on their side, they can get more and continue to grow their ranks. It's actually kind of a median tone shift, as it makes you realize that ultimately everything that Strange has been doing to fight the Poisons has only been hurting his cause. So I dig that. It's nice. It's a nice little tone shift. And helps add a bit more gravitas as well. The Venoms have figured, as it puts more weight on the Venoms to take down the Poisons, as now they're kind of on a time limit as the Poison magic users start breaking through Strange's runes in order to convert him. So again, I like it. It's a good issue. Again, I like it. So yeah, on the whole, Venomverse #3 is a fun issue. Helps progress the plot. Has a couple of decent character moments in there. Some really good action. A nice plot twist with the Poisons and why they want Doctor Strange. On the whole, just a fun issue. So yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I will hopefully see you on Saturday as we look at issue 4. So till then, I hope you have a good Thursday, and take care.